Part 10. How Not to Train Your Dragon. So this chapter is the first one since chapter 11, where there's a mode exclusive version for both Eliwood and Hector. This is so they can get their own exclusive weapons. Understandably, there are some major differences, which I'll be pointing out as I go along. The first thing we see is Nergal twirling his moustache, or should that be twirling his goatee, at Ninian, demanding her to open the Dragon's Gate for him. Although she refuses, he taunts her, reminding her that he's capable of just forcing her to do it. This causes Ninian to be overcome with emotions or something, transform into a dragon form, and fly away. All the way to Eliwood, in fact, over near Ostia. Nergal just has to get the last word in with some ominous foreboding crap though. But how was Ninian able to transform into a dragon anyway? Both John in FE6 and Nils later in this game make clear how a lot of power is required to transform and maintain her dragon form in alive. And she's flying a really long distance too. Where'd she get all that power from? Didn't she just transfer power to Nils in the previous chapter? And it's even demonstrated later that Nergal took their Dragonstone away from them. And as far as I'm aware, you're not supposed to be able to do the whole transformation thing without a Dragonstone. Maybe Nergal has it like on his person, so it's close enough to work. But it keeps working after she's a long way away. And if this is all the case, why didn't Ninian and Nils transform and fly away to escape from Nergal way earlier than this? They could have even done the whole power transfer thing, had only one of them transform and the other rides them, whilst they get the heck out of there. This whole thing is so stupid. Furthermore, why didn't Nergal just hypnotize Ninian right there, open the gate, and win? Like, that's game over, man.
Game over, man! It's game over!
I just said that. This makes for what, the third time Nergal was poised to fulfill his plans? With nothing around to stop him, but yet again he opts not to, because the game hasn't filled the drama quota yet. And for you smartasses about to say some shit like, oh, but like, he needed energy to force Ninian to do it, and like, he needed that energy for like, summoning the dragons, idiot. Shut your traps. I'll show you why that's complete bullshit shortly, but first, just like with F-L, we need to have the full context, so I'll get to it later. Anyway, the scene cuts back to the Lords. Aethas rambles about how Eliwood needs to go through a trial to take Durandal, and how he has to fight the ghosts of fallen soldiers or something to prove himself, which is pretty confusing and borderline contradictory to FE6. Like, where were these ghosts in FE6? Sure, they say their souls were put to rest at the end of the chapter, but not in Hector's version. And what about the places we don't go to in FE7? Did the enemies you fight in FE6's guidance chapters get rid of them all before you got here? Nobody even mentions anything about ghosts at all. And they can't be at all the shrines, because we know that the fucking light spell is stored in like some kind of museum for worship and pilgrims, called the Saint's Tower. That means there'd be people around it at all times. And with the exception of Durandal, it doesn't seem like the locations of these special weapons are some kind of well-kept secret, because random scholars and shit know about them, and Burn always seems to know where they are too. The only reasons these ghosts are here now is because the developers needed to provide some kind of enemy to fight, and were strapped for options. Again, this is something I'll address in more detail later. Moving on from that, why is the layout of this map so drastically different to the layout of Chapter 8X in FE6? I wouldn't normally complain about this, but the game as a whole is pretty consistent in dedicating to matching the layouts of maps in FE6. I mean, just look at these maps in Burn, Laos, Ostia, and the Shrine of Seals. So why did they change 8X so much? And why is the altar where Durandal is kept using the same tile set as the Shrine of Seals now? Ugh. Then some more dumb fanservice crap happens where Aethas calls the ghost of Roland, who apparently needed to give his permission for his weapon to be used, which is again contradictory, but whatever. Hector's chapter is pretty similar, except it takes place before Eliwood's. The ghost of Durban, who literally says that he is Armad's, appears as well, and Hector essentially curses himself to die on the battlefield by taking the weapon. Which is again stupid fanservice crap in reference to what happens to Hector in FE6. There's no real good reason to do this. Nobody ever thought, gee, wasn't it weird how Hector died in FE6? Was that like a prophecy or something? This crap is not the kind of thing we needed to be told in the prequel. However, there's something else funny about this. You see, Hector's trial doesn't even canonically exist in Eliwood's mode at all. They just go straight to Durandal. Hector only gets Armad's when Aethas gives it to him later in the final chapter, so the stupid curse of Armad's never happens in Eliwood mode, or at least, Hector never consents to it. But that's probably better, because it was dumb anyway. Adding to that, Because Athos was able to just take Armads himself and hand it to Hector, this means he was always capable of just warping in, grabbing these weapons, and giving them to the lords. So why the stupid trial again then? What's the point? They've already proven themselves, and you've already decided that they're worthy. The fate of the world is at stake, and Ninian was literally just kidnapped. There is no excuse for wasting time like this. And as if old man Athos isn't slowing them down enough, he also tells the lords not to bring too many comrades into battle, as that would simply serve to excite the Guardians. Who the fuck cares if the Guardians jizz their pants? More people will get the job done faster. This is just a lazy excuse to give the player a low deployment limit for these chapters, especially if you're playing Hector hard mode, where Hector only gets to bring one buddy along for the ride through Spooky Ghost Town. Anyway, once they've gotten their shiny new toys from their respective caves, Eliwood's sword suddenly starts glowing. It's as if it has a
bad feeling about this.
An ice dragon appears. Jeez, who could that be? Eliwood slays the dragon with Durandal, but is somewhat taken aback, saying that his body moved on its own, and that the sword guided his arm. I don't think that defense is going to hold up in court. The fuck is this shit? F6 never mentioned any of this assuming direct control stuff.
I am assuming direct control.
Even Athos seemed somewhat surprised, but of course he has to layer it in his patent's kooky, ominous, mysterious dialect. And then Nergal warps in. Guess who's back? He says, Ninian proved useless. I've come for a replacement. You better remember this line. So Nergal is here for a replacement because Ninian escaped. He immediately grabs Nils and puts him under his hypnotic spell. It seems he's finally learning. But just when we think Nergal's up to speed on how to villain, he reverts back to his old habits of languishing in exaggerated melodrama. He asks Eliwood a question that he and the other protagonists should have been asking ever since New Resolve. Did you never wonder why it had to be Nils and Ninian who had to be the ones to open the Dragon's Gate? Hey, I said that. Back in chapter 21. Has Nergal been reading my review? Surprise, surprise. It turns out that the dragon Eliwood killed was indeed no one else but... murdering her with a giant sword. Oh wait, we're not doing that anymore. After she transformed, she had a second bout of plot-convenient amnesia, except this time she only remembers Eliwood, because she was so in love with him. And somehow, that means she knows his exact location, and beelines straight towards him, even though he was just teleported halfway across the continent by Athos. I guess that Nergal Raider works for Eliwood as well. Now I don't have a problem with the idea of a dramatic scene where Eliwood unintentionally kills Ninian. I know I sound like I hate drama sometimes in this review, but really, it's all about context and execution. That's what's messed up here, and in most of this game. For this scene to work, you have to completely shut your brain off and not think about any of the things that have to come together to make it happen. Which admittedly is what I did on my first playthrough, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. The fact that the scenes that lead into it are so short are definitely part of what can make the contrivances just wash over you. Also, I think the whole idea of having Durandal force Eliwood to kill her at best doesn't add anything, and at worst cheapens it. There is no real reason that he couldn't have just killed her accidentally without that. And I think the fact that Athos and Hawkeye both had to decide not to tell the lords about Ninian's heritage in order for this accident to happen is kinda lame too, but it's not nearly as bad as everything else. Anyway, Nergal gives Eliwood a couple of moments to say goodbye, then announces for the 43rd time that the world is going to cower in the shadow of the dragons he's about to call. Athos says he won't let it happen, and attacks Nergal with 4 Blaze, doing like 5 damage, even though the numbers during the battle stage should be more. Nergal laughs at him and says fire is no longer his foe. When was fire ever his foe? And why is he talking about legendary blades when Athos just cast a spell?
Well, this line from Nergal is messed up in multiple ways. The first and least egregious of these being the title Nergal gives to Athos' weapon. He calls it the purest fire, which isn't an accurate translation, but at least it's somewhat close to the original, Goka no Kotowari, which literally translates to reason of hellfire. It's commonly known as the infernal truth in the new translation, which is a great translation, I approve of it. However, he then names it as flame breath. I guess the translator mistook the zu in foru burezu for a su, so he read the second half of the word as breath, and then the foru part was assumed to be some kind of shorthand for flame, although that's still extremely wrong on many levels. Extra confusing when you consider it's what fire dragons use. Then the translator mistook the subject of the next sentence to be Forblaze itself instead of Athos, which is why he says, "Fire is no longer my foe," when he's meant to be mocking Athos's inability to hurt him. And finally, there is zero reference to blades of any sort in the original script. Nergal only refers to the fact that even a divine weapon barely scratched him. I guess the translators didn't know that Athos had a divine weapon, and assumed somehow Durandal had been used, seeing as Eliwood had just obtained it.
Jesus Christ. 5 mistakes in like 2 or 3 lines? How did this guy learn Japanese? From watching anime? So once again, the story finds itself at a point where Nergal has won. Athos cannot hurt him, and Nergal is poised to warp away, along with the hypnotized Nils, who will presumably open the gate for him. So what brilliant plot device do the writers use to get the protagonist out of this mess? Nergal just leaves. Without Nils. What the fuck happened to "I've come for a replacement"? What the fuck is his explanation for this? Out of respect for the man Athos used to be? What? Ah.